Heidi Heitkamp, ABC News political contributor and the former Democratic senator from North Dakota. Hey, Heidi.
Hey.
At this point, I'm curious what you, overall thought of the performance tonight by President Biden. And do you think that he's able to convince voters? And George asked him if he would be willing to take a cognitive test, and he declined.
Well, I mean, so I wore kind of two hats. I tried to think of, if I were not as engaged in politics as I am, how would I perceive this? And I'd say a much better night for the president, looked in command, but a little too sure that he alone can do it. I think the average American would say, really? Just because you've done it in the past doesn't mean you can do it in the future. But I mainly watched it from the standpoint of, if I were a vulnerable Democratic incumbent senator, how would I feel about this interview? And what really concerned me, probably more than I alone can do it, which seemed to be kind of where he was at, was this idea that I don't believe in the polls, I'm ahead, that this isn't a problem, pay no attention to all that. He's got a very big political problem, and that is a 36% approval rating. And George asked him about that. He said, I've never seen anyone get reelected with a 36% approval rating, to which he disputed that. He disputed the polls. He disputed what has been really anemic poll numbers really since the beginning of his presidency. And that isn't going to garner any kind of confidence for a vulnerable Democratic incumbent who's trying to, in fact, win in this election. And so, I think that overall a good performance, but not good enough.
You pointed out the polls in which he's trailing. He, pushed back and told George, that's not what our internal polling is showing. And yet 80% of voters, according to the Wall Street Journal, think that President Biden is too old to run for a second term. So is this a president not in touch with data?
Well, it's a president who's spinning the data that is there. Joe Biden's been around politics for a long time. He knows better. And I always say, anytime a politician says pay no attention to the polls, they pay attention every day. And the latest polls tell you that not only has he not gained ground from a position of weakness, he is losing ground. And if I'm a incumbent vulnerable congressman from New York, I'm not happy tonight. I'm going to be talking to my leaders saying, what are we going to do about this and how do we recover? But I think it's important.
Sorry, you talked, Heidi, about the idea that what just concerned you was this idea that I alone can do it. There's also this idea that the president does his best, that if he does his best, that's enough. And Congressman Mike Quigley earlier tonight took issue with that. What do you think? If the president does enough, is that enough? His best, is that enough?
That was a really bad answer. That was a really bad answer. He could have gone back to, I don't expect to lose, but to simply suggest that he wins if he tries really hard. You can't say Donald Trump is an existential threat to the United States of America and then say the only thing that matters is how do I perform and if I do my best. That's not good enough. And you're seeing the response from donors. You're seeing the response from people on the margin in the Democratic Party, governors, congressmen. Nothing that happened tonight will change how people feel. But it does tell you one thing, that it's going to be very unlikely that the president of the United States, Joe Biden, will in fact exit this race. And so the question is, what next?
Well, it's not just people on the margins. We're reporting tonight that Senator Mark Warner, one of your former colleagues, is gathering other senators to talk about confronting President Biden on this. We know that Hakeem Jeffries is doing a listening tour this weekend. What do you make of all these calls to meet and discuss whether or not it's time for the president to drop out?
Well, I think for someone who is not in cycle, Mark's not, who feels like I have the latitude to maybe take some leadership here. I don't think it says anything other than, Mark has always been a leader. He always speaks truth to power. He sees this as an issue if, in fact, that's what is happening. His staff has not denied that he's talking, but he is really trying to be the leader for those vulnerable Democratic incumbents, be it, our friends in Montana, our friends in Ohio, Nevada, across the board, even Pennsylvania. The latest polling that I've seen shows Biden losing in Pennsylvania by not just a little margin. And that could, in fact, because these Senate races are nationalized, that could take out a lot of really great senators. And so, kudos to Mark for sticking his neck out. We'll see what happens as a result of it. And, I've said all along, the same thing everyone has said. Joe Biden has been an extraordinary president. Joe Biden stepped in and won this race, took Donald Trump out. He is a really good human being, has helped me in my races. But I think it is time that people start speaking truth to power. And then once the decision is made, we figure out, or the Democrats figure out a strategy moving forward to win these races.
It sounds like a lot of loyal opposition to me, Heidi Heitkamp. Thank you, as always, for your perspective.
Thanks, Juju.